Welcome everyone to our gravel roads maintenance webinar series. This is number 2 of 4. Today we're going to be focusing on maintenance practices. So I'm just going to go through a couple intro slides and introduction of Minnesota LTAP and also our instructor Brian Jackson, and then I'll hand it over to him. Okay, so everyone, welcome. This webinar series is presented by the Minnesota Local Technical Assistance Program at the Center for Transportation Studies at the University of Minnesota. Minnesota LTAP is sponsored by the Minnesota Local Road Research Board and the Federal Highway Administration. So Minnesota LTAP was established in 1992 by Federal Highway Administration and in partnership with Minnesota's Local Road Research Board. Minnesota LTAP is one of 52 LTAP centers nationwide. Our programming is designed to provide local transportation agencies with the tools for improving operations. LTAP's ultimate goal is to foster a safe, efficient, environmentally sound transportation system by providing skills and knowledge for local transportation providers through training, events, demonstrations, technical assistance, and technology transfer. So throughout the year, LTAP offers a variety of training and education, from annual events to technical workshops, including this webinar series on gravel roads. And we also have self-paced online classes. Minnesota LTAP has a variety of newsletters, reference documents, videos, a website, and provides library services and technical document searches. So before we begin the webinar, I want to just go over a little tutorial if you've never used Zoom webinar platform before. So right here in the middle is the chat box. So this, you can chat with all panelists and attendees. So if there's something you want to share about your experience or a reference, that would be a great spot to put that information right here in the chat. If you have a question, you can always raise your hand, and I would prefer you putting the questions in the Q&A, because these then will easily able to track them and be able to answer them in a timely manner. And if you need to leave at any point, there's the leave meeting button. And one note, we are recording this session. It will be available on our website in the next couple weeks. And if you need a copy of the presentation or a PDH form to track for if you're tracking hours or credits for licensing, you can please contact me afterwards with my email, and I'll be able to provide you that information. And our instructor today is Brian Jackson. He's a heavy equipment operator for 30 years. He's served in the U.S. Navy, becoming licensed on 49 different pieces of heavy equipment. He spent over 20 years at Fillmore County, Nebraska, where he ran a route of 78 miles. He's a former motor grader instructor for Nebraska LTAP, and in 2019, he started his own training business, providing equipment training across the Midwest for county, city, and state employees on virtually all equipment. I'm going to stop sharing and hand everything over to Brian.
All right, thanks, Catherine. And I want to say thank you to everybody for attending today's webinar while they're here. And I appreciate everybody being here. And I wanted to say thank you to Minnesota LTAP and Catherine for allowing me to be a part of the webinars. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about maintenance and practices. But once we get started on today's webinar, there's a few things I wanted to clarify up in regards to questions from the last webinar we had. Somebody had made the question, you know, when you refer to the blade staying straight and not cupping and stuff, if I could specify or clarify that more. So a lot of times when we talk about a blade that's cupping, we talk about the center part of the blade. When we talk about the blade or the cutting edge, we're talking about the pieces that bolt to the moldboard. And when we talk about cupping, a lot of times the center of that blade will cup to conform to our road. So when we talk about keeping our blade straight, that's what we're talking about there, is keeping that cutting edge straight, so that way we'll be able to design our roads to the proper shape, like the modified A that we're striving for. One of the other questions that we had too is, when you start to blade a road, whether you're pulling shoulders or doing a regrade and stuff, where do you begin? And that could really vary. these are a couple different trainings I did. When you're deciding where to start, when you're blading the road, or you start to pull shoulders, you got to kind of list your objectives of what you're trying to accomplish with that road. If I'm going to start bringing material up on the road, am I going to try to do this as part of a maintenance practice? Am I going in to do a total rebuild? Or, what exactly am I going to do? And one of the big factors as to where you start when you start doing this to a road is you got to determine what you're going to do with the vegetation. Am I going to bring the vegetation up onto the road and incorporate it into the material on top of the road? Or am I going to save that material and roll it back in my foreslope? So after I get done doing my grading, I can use that material to start reseeding. So you got to kind of, when you get ready to go out there and start, you got to kind of look at what you're going to do with the material and how you're going to do it. You also have to look at, do I have other equipment available to help me deal with that vegetation or sod when I start bringing it up on the road? Am I only going to use the motor grader? Am I going to have a roller available, a sheep's foot or a disc? And we're going to talk about the different rollers and stuff a little bit today too. This is where I wanted to clarify that when we talk about keeping the blade straight, we're talking about the cutting edges. And that's the section that's bolted to the moldboard that shapes or profiles our road. That's the section that you need to make sure you keep them straight. So we obtain the proper profile to our road so we get that modified A shape. Cupping, the red line in the center, that is the cupping that happens to our blades. And that's a lot of times that's where we get that parabolic shape to our roads. And it creates a lot of maintenance practices that we need to try to fix. So it's really important when we talk about the cutting edges, regardless of what type you use, you need to make sure that you keep those straight to properly profile your road. This was the next slide we were talking about when they were talking about when reclaiming material or starting to do work on a road, where do we begin? And this is what I was talking about when we have to kind of decide what we're trying to accomplish with the road when we're out there. What are we going to do? Are we trying to bring this road back over time through maintenance practices, reclaim a lot of lost material, or are we going to go out there and actually rebuild the road? The picture up in the top left-hand corner, that's one where we was doing the road as a total rebuild. We actually started towards the back slope and established our flat bottom ditch and brought it all in from our right-of-way, from our power poles. And then when you take a look at the bottom right, that's one where we were going to start pulling the shoulders in and start to reclaim the material because they were going to do a rock embedment on the road surface once we got done. And we actually started on one side of the road. And one thing you got to try to remember when you're out there is there's a lot more material there than what you might think of. When we started building this road here and bringing up the side of it, we brought up so much material. There's probably about a 3-foot ditch in there. By the time we got done, that ditch was actually probably about 2 foot over the top of my head because we had brought that shoulder up so much. So when you start to build those shoulders up and stuff too, and you talk about right-of-way, we also have to also make sure that we maintain that 4-to-1 foreslope so it's safe for the public when they leave the road. And you can see the tire tracks there where the superintendent had actually drove down off the road onto the foreslope and back on, so that way that you're maintaining a good foreslope when you're out there. But one of the biggest things you got to do when you're going out there to start is you got to decide how I'm doing it and what I'm doing with the vegetation. If I'm going to incorporate the vegetation into the road surface, or if I'm going to save it for erosion control and roll it up onto the back slope. If you're going to bring that material up on the road, especially the vegetation, you have to make sure that you get good compaction out of it when you bring that back up there. So, the big thing is that I can suggest when you go out to start working on a road and what you want to do with it, you just got to take a look at the road, see what's out there, and make a list of objectives that you want to accomplish when you're out there, and you got to kind of work with what you have for equipment when you're out there. Our first poll question is, of the following terms, what is the engineered process of increasing the density of soil? It's really important when we're out there to understand a lot of this stuff when we're out there and how we use the equipment. And it also is a key factor when it comes to purchasing equipment, what we're going to use when we're out there.
We'll let the poll run for about a minute, and then I'll end polling and share the results with everyone.
Catherine, I wanted to say thank you for letting me know that my screen wasn't sharing. I'm actually on the road this week training So I'm actually doing this from my motel room. So it's been a little iffy this week sometimes whether I have Wi-Fi or not. So
Yeah. It would also be great if you showed the presentation mode.
oh, okay.
I don't know if
Okay.
it'd be a little easier to see the
See the
slide.
pictures. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'll be ending polling shortly. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so I just ended polling and you can see the results. 86% went to compaction, 12% blending, and 2% grading.
Yep. And the correct answer is compaction. Compaction is what we use to increase the density of our soil. And especially when we're out there working on our road surfaces, a lot of times when I'm out there training, there's a lot of different ways to compact the road, and there's a lot of different techniques that some of the people do. And this is going to be a good question to lead us into when we start talking about rollers and what type of rollers that we want to use. So there's a lot of different rollers out there on the market that we can use. There's a lot of discussion about the rubber tire pneumatic smooth drum rollers or a sheep's foot. When you take a look at what roller you're going to use when you're out there working on your roads, once again, you got to kind of take a look at what you're trying to accomplish when you're out there. If you take a look at your rubber tied rollers and your pneumatic rollers, a lot of them, they're a good overall roller, but they're mostly designed for asphalt, for, your chip and seals and stuff like that. They can do a good job of laying that stuff down, but when you're working with an aggregate road, one of the things that I've seen a lot when I've been out there doing training is the effectiveness of what a sheep's foot roller can do. A sheep's foot roller, to me, especially on an aggregate road, it's going to compact your road a lot better. And then also, too, it's going to help you bust the material up. So in a certain sense, a sheep's foot can be used as a pulverizer, a compactor, and all that stuff. And the teeth of and the feet of a sheep's foot, once you see, they make penetration into the soil. So they're really packing the material down good. And if you pack that enough, you can actually get to where you're walking those sheep's foot on top of the road. A little demonstration of that is I want you to take a look at these two pictures here. The can represents a smooth drummed roller or a pneumatic roller, and the meat pulverizer over here kind of represents a sheep's foot roller. So I took a dot, it's a little piece of candy to kind of use this demonstration with. And when you take that can and you roll it over that dirt, over that dot, that's kind of like a clump of grass. And you can see how it kind of smushes it down, but it don't really break it up or compact it, and it actually sticks to the can too. And that's one of the problems that you'll have when you have a pneumatic roller or a rubber tired roller, is if that material is too wet, it'll actually stick to your tires and stuff too. So it just kind of smushes it, but it don't really push it down to get that good compaction like what we need with our aggregate roads. When you take a look at the dot that we use the meat tenderizer on, you see how the teeth really punctured into it, and that's really going to help us out when we're trying to bust that material up, and it's really going to give us that compaction that we're out there when we're looking for on our roads. If you look back to, I'll go back a couple pictures here. When you take a look at this picture here, when you take a picture, look at the one on the bottom right, once we brought the sheep's foot roller out there and they actually started packing it, you could see how much faster that windrow busted up, and we started to get rid of all that vegetation because we'd actually brought all that vegetation up onto the road. And as the operators were coming by and cutting it, you can actually see how they were cutting it, and it was cutting it smooth, and it was getting that shiny look to it because we were getting that good compaction when we were out there. So you really got to take into consideration your budget and, like I said, what you're trying to accomplish when you're out there. And then one of the other big topics that we always talk about are a disc. There's a lot of different discs on the market. All these tools can be useful to help you when you're out there, but you also got to be careful when you're using your disc and how you use them. If you're only using a disc, like in the top left-hand picture, a lot of times, or the other top picture, when you take a look at that, a lot of times that tends to round the shoulder of our road off. So if you go out there and you're doing this, to run a disc down the shoulder ahead of time could be a good way to help bust up that material and help it to lay there and rot. But you always basically need to come back behind with your motor grader and cut that and really reestablish that good hinge point clean that shoulder up, and get that material out of there. There's a lot of different discs on the market. If you take a look at that bottom one, from my experience, the discs that have the serrated blades on them tend to work a lot better. They tend to plug up a lot less. You can use them in wetter soils. If you tend to use the round disc, like the tractor mount and stuff, some of those too, the spacing on your disc blades also play a big difference too. So, you know, you got to look at the spacing on your disc, what you're trying to accomplish, and the moisture that you're out there working with. A good way to use a disc is you can always cut that material with your moldboard, bring it up onto the road top, and then run your disc across it. It just speeds the process up for busting up your material, especially when you're reclaiming material. And the key point to remember is there's a lot of good material out there on our forest slopes that we can incorporate into our roads. True or false? To properly fix potholes down the center of the road, you need to first cut or scarify to the bottom or slightly below the pothole, and then compact the loose material.
So I just launched the poll, and again, like previously, we'll do about 1 minute so people can record their answers, and then I will share the results.
Excuse me. So, like I said, you know, when we talk a little bit about rollers, we talk a little bit about disc and different stuff like that. A lot of things come down to your budget. When you go to purchase anything, it comes down to what you have for a budget, and you have to take a look at what you're trying to accomplish with that attachment or with that piece of equipment that you're buying. You know, so kind of research it a little bit and make sure you get what's going to be able to work best for you and your entity while you're out there.
And if anyone has questions along the way, don't hesitate to enter them into the Q&A portion on the lower part of your screen. Okay, so I'm ending the poll. And as you can see, I'm sharing the results, 89% true, 11 false.
That's a really good question, and that's a little bit of a trick question. The actual answer to that is false, and I'm going to show you why. I'm going to or can you still see me?
Yes.
You can see me?
Yeah, you can stop sharing.
I kind of lost the screen on my end. Can you see these hinges in front of my face?
Can you stop sharing your screen?
Stop share?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's better.
Okay. Can you see me now?
Yes.
Yep. Can you see these hinges? Can you see the hinges?
Yes.
Okay. I want you to think of these hinges as your road top. And when you think of your road top, we have two drive lanes to our road top. We have one side and we have the other. A lot of our roads are shaped like this to where we have the flat centers. And that's why we're getting the potholes down the center of our road. When you take a look at the little hump here, that actually represents the quarter crown in our road. So a lot of times when we go out there and we send our operators out and we tell them to cut that pothole all the way down to the bottom in the center of our road and then fill it back in, actually what they're doing is they're making the center of our road flatter. And you're not actually ever going to get rid of a pothole until you get your road properly profiled the correct way. So when they go out there and they cut that material and then they go to lay it back in there, most times generally they don't have a water truck and they don't have the proper moisture, so they're putting all that loose material back out there, so they're not going to get the proper compaction, and plus they're making the center of the road flatter. When it really comes to getting the potholes out of the center of the road, and we have two drive lanes, we got to get rid of the quarter crown out of our roads. We got to get our roads shaped like that. Now you notice, I don't know if you could see that, but now we got that A shape right down the center line of our road, and we got the potholes on each side of our center line. Now we can actually go out there and cut them and get them out of the road. But we got to eliminate this part of the road and cut it from here to eliminate that pothole to get the proper shape to our roads. So, did you see that well, Catherine?
Yeah. It's decent.
But that's just a good simple way to design it. You got to kind of think about when you're out there and how you're cutting stuff like that, because the idea is we want that road shaped from the center of our road all the way to our hinge point. And so we have to really be careful how we address those potholes down the center of our road. So this was the hinges I was talking about. And you can see how we have two halves to our road, and that's how we have to blade it. The little holes, the screw holes, those represent potholes in our road, and the humps actually represent the quarter crown in our road. So when we go out to address potholes down the center of our road, we have to be careful how we have our operators cut them. They actually have to cut, and you have to shape from the center line of your road all the way out to your hinge point. And if we send them out there to cut just straight down the center and replace that material back in there, we're actually making the center of our road flatter, and we're putting loose material out there, which is just going to lead to more potholes and washboards. We're going to talk about material a little bit, and I'm going to address material from a little bit different of a fashion. A lot of times, maybe some of the concept a little bit is that, right away we think material is always going to be the answer to our solutions, but sometimes it can actually hurt us a little bit more down the road. And it really all comes back to design of that road when you're out there. When we take a look at the material here that was placed down this road here, typically the road has pretty poor design to it. We can see we're getting rutting and really soft shoulders along the edge of the road. And so now we go ahead and we put more material on top of that material, and we're really never going to allow that material to dry out or to firm up. And actually when we go out there too, if we take a look at this road, there's a lot of material that's laying over there on those four slopes, and we got to start trying to bring some of that material back up into our roads. And when you do that, especially if you're fighting frost boils, frost heaves, soft shoulders, rutting, when you take that vegetation off of that shoulder and you actually start to shape that shoulder, and you actually start to profile and shape your road the way it's supposed to be designed with that modified A shape, you'll find how much better that road will actually hold up, and you'll really address a lot of those problems when we're out there. When we take a look at this road and we talk about material, budgets are tight. I've been out on the road doing quite a bit of training in the last couple of weeks, and every place I go we talk about the budget, and we talk about the budget when it comes to material. So we can take a lot of look at different practices we're doing, and we can start to actually save a lot of money when it comes to our budget by being able to reincorporate the material back into our road. When we take a look at this road here, here we went, and this is really good material over here. It's a good mix of coarse and fine aggregates here, but we laid it all down on our four slope. I still not really sure why we did that, but that's a lot of good material that we could be utilizing on our road top. When you take a look at the picture to the bottom right, here the operator tried to go back down and grab some of it, but we actually made a lip and a cut down on our four slope. But there's all that good material there that we need to try to bring back up and get incorporated back into our road. So when we take a look at material and we really talk about material, I like these two pictures here because it's the same road, it's the same material, it's a different design to the road. When we take a look at the top left picture, we've got the good modified A shape to it. The road holds up really well. We're getting 4 tire tracks down the road. They're not driving down the center. Once we take that road and we flatten it out a little bit, and we're retaining all that water in the center of our road, it really doesn't matter what you put on that road for material. If you're not shaping your road correctly, you're out there running with cupped blades when you're out there, you're really inflicting, we're really doing a lot of damage to our roads by doing that. And we really need to take a look at maybe some of the practices we're using, so that way we can benefit and take advantage of all that material that we have right there on our road and incorporate it back in. And by doing that, we really work to build a lot safer road, and we can really take a look at cutting our budgets and stuff too. So this is my last poll question. The National Safety Council estimates on average that a loss of life on our transportation system, to include the loss of quality of a life, equates to what dollar amount?
And I'm launching the poll, and you'll have 1 minute to submit your answer, and then I'll share the results.
I think this is a really good question. When I took a look at this, I never would have kind of estimated what it would have been. And when you start to think about it, especially when you come to our rural roads and stuff, rural roads only count for about a quarter of our roads across the United States, but they account, dependent on which poll you look at, they equate for anywhere from 44% to I've heard as high as 52% for the deaths in our transportation system. So, you know, that's really something to look at when they equate for a lot less of our mileage across the United States. So I believe there's a little over 16,000 deaths on rural roads last year, and I believe on urban roads and interstates there was a little over 19,000. So when you look at the value amount, that's a lot of dollars every year. And, you know, to really try to put a price on somebody's life, you know, that's pretty tough too. So
I'm closing the poll and sharing the results. So 50% of you was selected 4.1 million, 33 at 3.2 million, 12% of you selected 2.6 million, and 5% at 1.3 million.
The correct answer is D. It's $4.1 million. That's what they equate the cost of a death out there. So, you know, that's something really to think about when we're out there, especially when we're maintaining our roads, building our roads, construction. That's why, you know, I am big on safety. I always stress safety. And to me, there's a lot of things that we could be doing out there, maybe changing our practices a little bit, better shaping those roads, you know, to really cut down on the deaths that we're having out there in our transportation system. So. That was kind of what I had today for a little bit on material, and some of the other stuff and the disc and that, and we'll get ready to take some questions. Like I said, I address material and stuff a little bit differently. I've been out on the road quite a bit the last couple of weeks, and, you know, everywhere it seems like I go, you know, I kind of get a little bit of the same thing. You know, we're short on rock. We don't have the budget for material and stuff out there. And I keep trying to tell everybody that, you know, the material's there. There's ways you have to set your machine. There's things you have to do to start reclaiming it. And all the trainings we've done, even when we've cut the road, pretty much all the operators and even some of the, you know, some of the management stuff, they're really surprised at the amount of material that we're pulling up and we're reclaiming out of the ditches and off the forest slopes and stuff. So, but one thing to think about, and one thing I want you to think about is the motor grader. That's the Iron Man of the equipment world. That thing can do so many things, and we really need to start utilizing it for what it can be, what it can accomplish. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time and a lot of training to be a good operator. You really have to know your equipment, your routes. It takes a lot of time and effort. Always be willing to learn. And it really takes, to be good and for us to start making a change when we're out there, is it really takes a good collaboration between everybody, everywhere from the management all the way down to the new guy, to really start communicating, to make some changes and stuff when we're out there.
Hey, Brian.
Go ahead.
I'll just say, Steven has a question for you. If I can get him, hold on.
I'll talk about these real quick while you're getting that if you want to, Kathy.
There he goes. Steven, you are unmuted if you want to.
He's still muted on my end.
Okay. Well, Steven, if you could submit your question in the Q&A, that'd be great. Okay, so we have a question here. Do you have any thoughts on a road that has been stabilized with cement or that practice?
For which practice would you be talking about? To start reclaiming material off the forest slopes? Is that kind of what you're talking about? Did you come in and put Portland in and mix it with your aggregate, or did you actually make it a cement road? Would you help? Can I get a little bit more clarification maybe on that?
I'm waiting.
Okay.
Well, if anyone else has any questions while the anonymous attendee is adding additional information for Brian. Oh, here we go. Mixed it in with the road.
You mixed the Portland in with the road, or was it crushed concrete that you mixed in with the road? Like if it's crushed concrete, which I'm assuming is probably what you did, is you crushed some concrete and you mixed it in with the road. If you're going to be doing that, I'm not for sure what size stone you used, but that can make a really good base. And one of the big things you're going to do if you're going to incorporate concrete, crushed concrete, into your road, you know, to scarify your road, scarify it. You don't have to bury your shanks. Scarify it 2-3 inches deep, depending on the size of the stone you're using. If you've got a sheep's foot, that works really good. and you can take that sheep's foot and you can blend that in, and you can actually roll that concrete into the road. And that's actually makes a really good base, and it actually works really good if you're going to start reclaiming material off your shoulder, because it takes a lot of fines to keep that concrete or your larger limestone and some of that larger aggregate bound together, and you can get a lot of that right off of your foreslope when you're out there. So
he clarified it's Portland cement.
he had a Portland cement to it.
Not
Yeah.
crushed.
So is he talking about reclaiming material off the foreslope and stuff then too?
We'll see. Oh,
Okay. Well, I mean,
he said no. He said no.
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 Which practice would he be talking about then if he's not wanting to reclaim material or what? Just blading the road? To me, there's a lot of different practices. Just blading the road. You just want to go out and blade it. Yeah, I wouldn't see a problem with just going out there and blading it. It probably gets to be a pretty hard surface. I don't have a lot of experience with mixing the Portland in with your material and then just laying it out there. But I imagine it probably makes a pretty hard surface when you're out there. How do you address the potholes and stuff like that? And the big thing would be is you still have to make sure that it's properly profiled to work that road. You know, it's kind of like limestone. Limestone, when you lay that down, especially with the fines and you get some moisture to it, it gets pretty hard when you're out there. So having the rock bits or the picks on the front to help scarify that a little bit and give you some material to work with can help you out a lot.
Okay, great. We have another question. It's when you start to pull material from the inslope, are you killing the vegetation with a herbicide?
No, the ones that we've been doing, we have not been killing the vegetation with the herbicide. If that is a good idea. If you know that you're going to go out and you're going to be pulling the shoulders, pulling the material off that foreslope, you know, if you have the funding to go out there with the herbicide and spray and kill that off first, that works really well. You're going to fight the vegetation a lot less. Lately, with what we've been doing, is we've been going out there and trying to show the operators how even later in the season like this, as the vegetation has grown, how we can cut that material and still manage it later into the season to give us more time to work on our roads and reclaim that material. So, and like I said, you know, you can use a herbicide on it. You know, if you know you're going to do it, you can take a disc before you start to pull that foreslope, and you can run that disc over that grass and kill it and let it lay there for, you know, chop it up a little bit and let it lay there for, you know, a week or two before we bring it up. So.
Great. We have another question here from Eric Larson. He said, I work for a county in Georgia that used a boiler ash for years. It is extremely fine and moisture sensitive. We have experimented with a full depth reclamation using emulsified asphalt with mixed results. Any suggestions on how to increase compaction so that it can be grabbed and shed water better? Water better.
You know, that's a great question, and I don't have probably a lot of experience with that sort of material. I guess over the years of my stuff and a lot of the work that we've done to increase compaction, a sheep's foot roller is one of the best ways, because as it packs it, especially if you're working with a finer aggregate in, that will really help increase the density of the soil. And so as you actually keep running that sheep's foot over there, your blade's actually running behind it, filling in the sheep's foot where it's compacting, and then it just keeps doing it, and pretty soon you'll just see that roller start to walk up on top of the road as you achieve compaction. That is a compaction that is kind of tough to achieve with maybe your steel drummed or your pneumatic rollers.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for Brian?
Pretty quiet group today.
Yeah, I know. I was like our last first session. We had a lot of questions going back and forth.
I guess, you know, I can follow up on a few things too. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can be doing out there, you know, when we're out there and stuff. Like I said, you know, it don't matter what design you use, what you have for attachments, you know, when you're talking about your road top design and all that other stuff. That, like I said, that motor grader is a great piece of equipment, and it can do so much. And really take the time to spend the time with your operators and help them, because, you know, one of the things I've kind of, faced a little bit is sometimes they can get a little bit frustrated out when they're out there, trying to keep the public happy all the time and stuff. So, take the time to really work with them and make sure so that way you set them up for success when they're out there trying to accomplish their jobs. So.
Okay, great. Yep, we got a couple more questions that came in.
Okay.
How do you handle leaves and debris that you're pulling into the road?
How do I handle leaves and debris that I'm pulling into the road?
Yes.
If you're going to do that as a maintenance practice, one of the things that we've been working on is when you make that first cut, the first cut that you make on the edge of your road is the worst, especially if you got the curb and gutter out there, the lip, the sod, the leaves, all that other stuff. That's where you're going to get your worst vegetation. So one of the things that, try to work on when you make that first cut, limit the amount of material you bring up onto that road. Make that cut, make a nice cut, bring it up. And then a lot of times we've been doing some different practices with it. You can take that, just run that material across the road and leave you a little bit of a maintenance windrow over there. And then the key, if you do that, is you have to come back and work the windrow. One of the problems that we find is when we start doing that is when we start to bring that material up as operators is they'll take that material across and they'll make a light maintenance windrow. But then they let it lay there for, a month or two before they ever come back and work that material. So by the time you do that, it'll start to get regrowth and vegetation and stuff. So the idea is once you do that, if you make that first cut, only cut about 1 foot to 18 inches off of there to eliminate that curb and that gutter and get rid of that lip, bring that material up, try to work it about every week. Just bring that windrow back and forth across the road. And you'll find out within a couple of weeks, if you do that, it'll break up pretty good. It'll clean that windrow up real good and you'll get rid of that vegetation. And then once you do that, you can just keep working yourself down the forest slope and each time cut about another 6 inches to 1 foot and bring that up, but keep working that till you get to the bottom of your forest slope. It really works pretty effectively to do that way. The key also to that is, so you don't fight the vegetation so much and stuff, is to start early in the spring. Start when that grass is brown, or you can even start when the grass is frozen, and that is if you live in a colder region. But try to start early as you can, and that just gives you more longevity over the season to work that road and shape it up.
Great. What is a good material? Limestone, class 5, something else?
A good material is what you have to work with. When you take a look at those last other couple pictures that we had there, one of those was limestone with a clay in it. The other one was pumped gravel and black dirt. The biggest thing that I can say about material is you have to work with what you get, and that's just the reality of it when you're out there, and it's what you have for a budget. I've been hearing a lot, we just don't have the budget to get the material and stuff when we're out there. So you have to work with what you got. And, that limestone, that class 5, that's a good material. But you got to work with what you got. And I can't overemphasize enough to make sure you properly design your road and you properly shape it right. You can take bad material or less than adequate maybe material and put it on a well-profiled road, and that road will hold up really well. You can take some of the best material in the world, and I showed you some of those pictures of that, not profile your road properly, not properly place it, and that road won't hold up very well. So,
Great, thank you, Brian. How do you properly inspect the straightness of the blade? Just visually, or is there a standard process or method?
You can do a visual check of it. One of the best things you can maybe do is run a string line across it. Run a string line from one corner to the other corner. We were out on the roads yesterday and looking at the operator's blades, they probably didn't look like they were cupped that much. But once you got behind the machine and you seen how he was actually cutting the road, you could see what he was doing and the cup in the blades. So when we went up there, we stopped him and we had him pick up his moldboard. And from the naked eye, it really didn't look like that blade had that much of a cup in it. But once you do that, and once you really look at it, or run that string line from one corner to the other, it gives you a pretty good true reading of what that cup is in that blade. And one of the other big things is make sure your operators are rotating their blades, and I always say, maybe if it gets to be about that cup in the center, it gets to be about the thickness of your thumb. That's about the time you need to start rotating your blades because you got to keep them straight when you're out there.
Great, thanks. Another question is, thoughts on using a tractor-mounted rotary tiller for busting up vegetation while pulling the shoulders?
If you have access to one, it works really well. I was at a county one time where they had a rotary mounted tiller behind their tractor. They were actually using it for mixing cold mix, but it busted the sod and all that stuff up really well. If you have access to one of those, and it's great. It really saves a lot of time. The road we were working on this morning, we had a disc, and we also had a sheep's foot roller. And by the time we brought that material up and cut all the way down to the bottom, it only took us a couple hours, and we had that windrow busted up and looking really good. So, it's great to utilize what you got. So.
We have another question. How do you crown a narrow road, very narrow road, 8-foot road, 14-foot mold board?
You have an 8-foot road. That sounds maybe a little bit more like a trail. If you have an 8-foot road, but that means that the road is just as wide as your motor grader, because your motor grader is 8 foot on the outside of its wheels. So you'd probably basically have to take a look at your road. Where's the road supposed to drain to? Chances are you'd probably have to set your blade in pretty tight, right your toe behind your front tire, drop plates in that material right by your tandem, and you'd probably have to slope the road and drain it all one way. You can make a 2-pass on it, but either way you're blading that road, you're going to be blading against traffic. So generally you probably have to maybe slope it one way.
Great.
I'd be interested to see that road.
Sheldon, if you want to send me an email with some pictures, Brian would love to see your road you're talking about. So here's another one. In South Dakota, we are seeing an increase in the amount of stabilized bases, primary base 1, and it is recommended that they should use the bullet teeth on their blades to break up the surface prior to reshaping, relaying, and compacting the granular material.
And it's recommended that they use the bullet teeth before reshaping.
I think that was that was a statement from Gil, not a question.
Oh, they're using it to bust up the surface to reshape it and stuff like that. And those bullet teeth work really good for doing that. And because it's really, when you're going to reshape it and do all that and recompact it, it's good to bust that surface of that material a little bit. And that's really good if you have access to all that. The only thing I would caution about is I've been places where they run the bullet teeth, the picks, the rock bits all the time. And if you're running them all the time, you have to be really careful because you're busting the crust to that surface of that road all the time. So then it takes compaction and moisture to reestablish that crust. So you have to be really careful, how you use those. But if that's how you're using them, that's a really good tactic. So.
Another question is, what is the main reasons for washboarding? Sometimes they are put into the road as it is being bladed.
Washboarding. There's a lot of factors that contribute to washboarding. The amount of material you're carrying on your road surface. That's going to lead, it's the braking and the acceleration of the vehicles. And that could also be due to operator error. When it comes to washboarding, I always say strive to have your operators set a uniform layer of aggregate across the road. I always strove for about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of loose aggregate across the road top. And not carrying too much loose aggregate on your road top will help prevent washboarding. If you're getting washboarding around your super elevations, one thing you might have to look at too is what am I running for a cross slope on that super elevation? Maybe if I get it back down a little bit, maybe I got it too high. And if it's caused by the machine, a lot of times the balancing and the loping, a lot of it comes down to your machine settings. I know a lot of times, some people might say, it's the speed that operator's working at. But a lot of times, if that operator's cutting some washboards and stuff out there, if you can just get them to change their settings a little bit. Sometimes I got to change the angle a little bit. Sometimes I got to change the pitch a little bit. Maybe if I start to utilize my articulation, it gives me a more stable balance with that machine, a wider base, that can also help eliminate washboarding. But most generally, a lot of your washboarding is caused by your traffic, braking and accelerating, and too much loose aggregate on top of your road surface.
Great, thank you. What is the proper way of evaluating the extent of a pothole and fix it the proper way?
The extent of a pothole, you just kind of have, you got to go out and address the road. You know, I know when we go out there, we address the road. Um, to take a pothole out, you got to shape your road right. You got to get the water out of the center of the road and get it out of there. You know, a lot of times we might take a look at our roads and we think that we've got that good profile, but it might not be what exactly what we need when we're out there. Really take a look at the design of the road surface. Are we getting that modified A shape to our road? Is it looking like a parabolic road? Is it inverted? That would be the biggest key right there, is to take a look at the profile of the road surface, how to address a pothole and see what's causing it.
Great, thank you. Another question is there a composition of the blade in terms of hardness or whatever to provide the best wear? In other words, is a hardened blade a better choice? And if so, what should the hardness be?
You know, I couldn't tell you exactly what the hardness of a blade is. The steel's different on a lot of the blades. There are blades on the market that really provide benefits to staying straight over the longevity of them. They also allow you to allow your operators to run a lot more with a straight blade and reduce man hour from having to change them. I have my own some of my own recommendations for blades. You know, I really like the carbides. You know, I ran them for a long time. I've probably ran them for about 20 years. And one of the things, if I read that just right, just that popped up on there, a lot of times operators don't like a carbide tip blade. And I'll tell you why, because when they go down the road, that blade is chattering. And when they call it chattering, it's because it's hopping. And the reason that blade is hopping is because our road isn't profiled to handle a straight blade. So a lot of times we like the other blades, like our standard steel blades. Some of our lighter steel blades are less hardened blades, because they'll cup a lot faster. They'll wear a lot faster out in that center. So once we get that blade shaped to the roundness of our road, it won't chatter. And that is one of the biggest complaints that I hear from a carbide. I like them. I like the carbide inserts with the hard surface. They work well for snow removal, taking off ice, snowpack. I graded. I built a lot of roads with them, and I use them for routine maintenance. Plus, they have an increased safety factor because your operators are changing their blades a lot less. You know, I've heard quite a few stories. You know how operators are out there changing their blades, they're dropping them on their toes, or they hurt their back and they're changing them a lot more. So the less you put that operator underneath that machine and having to rotate and change those blades also is an increase in safety factor.
Great. What is the proper degree of slope from the center of the road to the ditch edge?
I recommend 4%. 4% is good. Typically our pavement is probably running about 1.5 to 2.5%. It's right around that 2% on an average. To me, that works well for a paved road, because that's a hard surface where the material isn't getting displaced and it's not changing. If you can stay around 4% on an aggregate road, that has proven to be a pretty good cross slope, even with depending on which material you're working with. If you have really good material, you can get by with 3%. If it's lighter, sandier soil, you might have to start looking up around that 5 or 6%. But generally, try to stay within that 3 to 6%. Give your operators a guideline of what you want them to strive for, and tell them you want to strive for that from the center line all the way to the hinge point of your road.
Another question is, what's your opinion on picks?
On picks, they can be the rock picks, they can be a very valuable tool, especially if you're working in some of your limestone rocks and stuff like that, and you get into some of your harder aggregates. One of the things that I like to do is I like to set up the machine. We made attachments for the front of our machines, and I've seen a lot of other counties are doing that too, where they're running the rock bits or the picks on the front of their machines, and then they have straight cutting edges on their mold boards. That allows you, when you get into like a hard time surface, or if you're working on quarter crown of the road, you can drop your picks down on the front of that machine. You can take quarter crown out. You can address potholes. You can address washboards. They'll address your washboards before you run your tires over them to help prevent that chance of loping. And then you can always follow up with a nice smooth blade to cut the road and make it nice and smooth. They have their advantages to them. I would just be careful about having your operators run them all the time, because they can really do a lot of damage to the road, especially if you don't always have the proper moisture to reestablish that that crust to your road.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. I see our time's coming quickly to an end. We do have actually two questions, the same question from different individuals. Might be a good segue into our next session. That will be July 15th. Is what's your opinion on leaving a maintenance windrow?
You know, that's a great question, and that's going to lead into our next session. I'm going to talk about maintenance windrows. Maintenance windrows can be a very effective tool, and they really help your operators achieve what they're trying to accomplish when they're out there on their trying to do their jobs. By not allowing your operators to ever run a maintenance windrow, that kind of a lot of times leads to some of the problems we have. One of the things that I like to do is I like to go early in the spring, retrieve material that got lost over on the fore slope in the ditch, create that windrow, work it back and forth, reincorporate all that material on the road, and then by the fall, get rid of that windrow to go into snow removal. By not allowing your one of the big things I see out there, by not ever allowing your operators to run a maintenance windrow, is they tend to want to leave too much material on the road, where we get the clumps of sod and the different things like that. Plus, as an operator, if you don't have some material to work with when you're out there, what are you going to do? You're going to start cutting with the toe of that moldboard. So we don't have any material to feed our moldboard, so we're going to start cutting with our toe. And when we start doing that, we start building lips, curbs and gutters, stuff like that. If public ain't used to running a windrow, or you're not used to it, try to pick a few miles and start to do different things. But they can be very effective in helping you control vegetation. I really think they're important parts of road maintenance, and there are certain times of the year you have to utilize them to accomplish what you want to do. So.
Okay. Well, we have two questions left, and so we'll be able to answer these in the next 5 minutes. What are your recommendations for quality gravel surfacing material, including PI and the amount of number 200 material?
The federal highway has a good PI out there to work with and stuff like that. The thing that's tough when you talk about the recommended PI and what's used for a surface material and stuff is so many times we don't have access to that standard. We don't have the budgets to get that material. So to sit there and recommend that we have to have a certain PI or this or that, I think can falsely lead to assumptions that we have that available to us, because in my travels, I don't see, unless you're a rich county or a rich state, you don't have the access to that. And you have to take what you work with to be able to get it, because most times from where I've been, the pits can't produce it. And if they can't produce it, the accessibility to it isn't there. So one of the things, like I said, it's a tough topic to talk about, but so I just try to get operators and entities and management to address situations with what they have accessible and what will work with their budgets.
Okay, nice answer. And then the last question we have time for is, any thoughts on dust control? On dust control?
Calcium chloride, that, some of the counties I've been to this week, they've been putting it down in front of the houses. That's been doing good. I know there's a lot of different aftermarket things when you're out there to work on that you can utilize. One of the big things, I'll come back to it. Try to look at how much material you're leaving, surface aggregate you're leaving on your road. The more loose aggregate, the more loose fines you leave out there, the dustier it's going to be. Set a guideline for how much material you want your operators to leave on the road top, and watch what your practices you're utilizing when you're out there. When it gets dry out and the road surface gets hard, do light maintenance blading just to keep your aggregate spread out across your road to help keep that road from deteriorating. But be careful not to be busting the crust of that road all the time, because every time we bust it, our large aggregates not necessarily going to stay there. It's going to maybe move to our edges of our road, but all of our dust and our fines are going to blow away. So we got to really be careful when we're out there. And the other big thing is we can do a lot if we send our operators to blade when there's moisture out there. I've done a couple classes within the last couple of weeks, and there seems to be this mindset: we get that moisture, we can't go out and blade that road, or it's going to turn to mud. But if you properly show them how to do it, getting them out there after a moisture and blading it, that really works well for shaping out your potholes, your washboards, leaving good aggregate out there. Plus, if that moisture's still there when they do it, they're going to get the compaction when they're out there. One thing you'll find about this time of the year, when you get some moisture, you probably get about 2 to 4 hours to blade it when you got some good moisture. By then, afternoon when it turns 90, that road's so hard you can't hardly cut it or blade it. So it's just it's a lot. It's a lot of different things you got to take in. So.
Okay, wonderful. Well, everyone, thank you so much for attending our second webinar in our Gravel Road series. You will be receiving an email tomorrow with a link to an evaluation, which is great because we were able to use the feedback from the first session to help shape this session. So if you could take a few minutes just to complete that survey, it's really helpful for us to offer future training opportunities. And then also there's a link to the next webinar, which will be on July 15th. So again, I just want to thank everyone for taking time to spend an hour with us today. Brian, thank you for all your hard work in putting this together. And again, if you want a CEU form or a PDH form, or even a copy of this presentation, you can send me an email. It's sell0146@umn.edu. I have it right now in the chat box if you want to open that up. Again, thank you, everyone. Until next time.
Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, I hope everyone has a great day.